So welcome everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the CEO and founder of DNA Behavior. And today I'm delighted to be doing another one of our identity interviews. And I've got the great pleasure to have with me Beth Miller, who is the CEO and founder of Executive Velocity. And Beth is a leadership development advisor, works with high-performing teams to take them to great places. She's written a book, Are You Obsessed by Talent? So that's something that she's extremely focused on and has been working, with our systems probably for the last 10 years or so. So we've had quite a long journey together. And so I'm going just to get you started, Beth, with a pretty simple question. Just tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now, your career journey, and we'll start there.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Hugh, for inviting me. This is a real pleasure. My journey, yes. So I started in finance. I was a finance major and worked in finance for about 5 years. And during that time, I realized I wasn't really having a good time. It was not something I enjoyed doing day in and day out. I was good at doing it, but it wasn't a passion of mine. So I was able to make a shift from finance to sales. I was working for Digital Equipment Corporation back then, and they had a program where they were training individuals in sales. So that's how I ended moving from Boston to Atlanta, was through the sales training program. And I was in sales for about 3 or 4 years. Ended up going to Coopers & Lybrand and being their business development manager for the Southeast region, specifically for consulting. It wasn't on the accounting side. And it was a great experience working for a major accounting firm and learning how to maneuver in a partnership was a really great challenge as well as a learning opportunity. But I decided at that point in time that my husband at the time had a accounting temporary services firm, and he wanted to start another division, which was more consulting related. So he convinced me to leave. And we grew that business, had Inc. 500, fastest growing companies, several times. This was in the late 90s. And then we sold the business in 2002 and took some time off. I was in my early 40s at the time and I wasn't ready to retire. So I found Vistage, which is a CEO membership organization similar to EO and some other peer group advisory firms. And that was a turning point for me. I realized that the ability to help small businesses grow their business, not just from a standpoint of operations and process, but from a standpoint of leadership, and not just leadership at the top level, the CEO, business owner, but leadership broadly was really what makes or breaks a company. It's people. It's you can have great processes, but if you don't have great people to follow and create those processes, you're not going to be able to execute. So that was a big aha, and that was about 15 years ago. So at that time, I was working for Vistage, and I was leading 3 or 4 groups at the time. I decided to start Executive Velocity in parallel, and that allowed me to take what I was learning with Vistage and apply it to other companies, specifically on the coaching aspect. And that then grew with the partnering with you and your firm. It allowed me not just to coach, but to advise companies on their talent when they were hiring, when they were figuring out how to develop them or redeploy them. Business DNA has become a cornerstone of of my practice.
No, that's a great introduction, Beth, and I think there's some big career shifts that went on in there from the finance career, which is, and I experienced it myself, having been an accountant, more the numbers side,
Mm-hmm.
to sales,
Yeah.
and then to leadership.
Yeah.
So and I know why you got out of the finance part, because you didn't really enjoy it after 5 years.
Yeah.
But what got you to, just tell me a bit more about the shift from sales to leadership.
Well, it was purely by coincidence. And that was, I was looking for something that I could do after selling the business. Because I had been working for myself for so long, the idea of becoming employed by another company was really not something I wanted to do. And Vistage provided me with a way of working for them, but in a contractual basis. So it provided me with the flexibility of working with the people that I wanted to work with and working when I wanted to work. And that to me is freedom. That, I'm being engaged mentally, that I'm constantly learning through not only the Vistage speakers, but also the members themselves, and the issues that they brought to the table, and the coaching conversations that I had. So it was purely by coincidence that I found this path. It wasn't that, I was reading some book and decided, hey, this is the direction I want to go. It was, hey, I need to get re-engaged, but I don't want to be employed full time.
Yeah. So when you, I understand that too. I don't think I could be employed. But was it, when you were working with all those clients or business owners in Vistage, was there something that you consistently, and you were coaching them, was there something that you consistently saw in them that you leverage now? Or was there a consistent set of insights?
I never saw anything consistent. Business owners, there were some business owners that I worked with that were true entrepreneurs, that, they had an idea and they went off and built a business. Then there were other individuals who were in family businesses. And so, they ended up growing up in the business, and at some point in time ended up taking the reins over the business. And then there was what I call the accidental entrepreneur. And there were several of them that I worked with who and these were generally professional service individuals who all of a sudden found themselves with more work than what they could do. So they started bringing people on, but yet they didn't have the business skill sets to build a business. I remember one who, finance, oh my gosh, he had no idea of what cash flow was. And so it was more blocking and tackling for him, versus other business owners that, understood the business, and really they were there to develop themselves and to, a higher potential, and develop their people below them. So there was a variety of scenarios there.
So of those different groups of people, which ones did you get the most fulfillment out of working with?
Oh, the last group, the group where, they understood business, and it was really developing them, breaking barriers to blind spots that they had. There was one individual, she had terrible listening skills, and it was really holding her back. And so that, we worked a lot on getting her to, ask questions versus creating statements and judging others, but getting curious.
So asking questions is a way to listen better.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it seems quite an interesting concept, but that's what I figured out myself, that I would learn to listen better if I could ask questions.
Yes, and good questions.
Yeah, a lot more customized to who they are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
So do you feel like they're the people that you also had the greatest impact with, that you got from a results perspective?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if I look back, those are the ones that you saw more significant growth in their business. Those are the ones that were able to successfully sell their business and reap the rewards of that. So yeah, they all had a higher level of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, so for you, working with them already being somewhat more evolved,
Right.
them
Exactly.
wanting to develop themselves, that's where you could come to the table.
Right. Exactly.
And do you think that your sort of standout talents with them were more around getting them to even be better with the emotional skills, or the emotional intelligence side of it, or actually then helping them map out the plan to go to the next stage?
Yeah, I think it was a blend, because if they didn't have a plan, then all the emotional intelligence in the world isn't going to get you to that next level. So there was clearly a plan involved, and then it was they were generally very self-aware. If you gave them a business DNA assessment, they would agree with it, up to 90-95% of it. Yep, that's me. I remember one individual, and she's like, I disagree with a lot of this. I'm thinking, okay, so this person isn't going to be coachable because she's not self-aware, and she didn't last long in the Vistage group because she just didn't get it. So that's another way of using business DNA. When I'm coaching, is up front, is when I'm debriefing the assessment with the client, is if I hear something like, well, this is only 60-65% correct, then that's a red flag to me. That okay. Then I have a conversation with the executive sponsor. I say, there's going to be a challenge here, and you need to understand that this person isn't aware of their shortcomings, and if they're not aware of it, they're not going to be changing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the thing, is that it brings out, what you're really saying is, it brings out the blind spots.
Yes.
And if the person's more blind to those blind spots than the average person,
right,
it's going to be very difficult to get them to change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they're not bought into it.
Now, there can always be one area where they're not seeing the issue, and it presents itself, and that becomes a conversation.
Yeah, and then generally what I'll do is I often will use a 360 assessment in addition to the business DNA. So then they will get a broader perspective of how they're being viewed by others, and that's generally where they'll go, oh, I get it now. And it also has to do with age. I mean, that the older you are, the more aware you are of who you are. A 20-year-old oftentimes isn't aware of some of their blind spots. And so it takes experience and feedback from others to understand that and understand those blind spots. So I've seen that happen with younger people. And then I encourage them to share the results with their friends and family, and see what their friends and family say. And generally, that's when their friends and family will say, "That's you."
Yeah, that's when the truth comes out, because they've been on the receiving end of a lot of it for
Right, exactly.
for a long time,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they've seen the hard wiring.
Yeah.
They've seen the hard wiring, emerge out.
And you bring up a point too, Hugh. And in fact, I was just doing a debriefing the other day where a gentleman who's retired, getting ready for succession planning, and he had done the business DNA, and he's like, "Well, I can see, I've had to, do things differently, and I can see where that would rate, in that scoring." I said, no, you don't understand. I said, these are natural. These aren't things that are learned. These are things that are built between 0 and 3 years old. And so he's like, "Oh," I said, "Now that doesn't mean you show up like that all the time, because you've got lots of experience and you've learned that in certain periods of time or times that you need to adapt, and you've adapted. But when you're under stress and pressure, that's where you're going to go." And there was a light bulb that went off when I said that to him. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it now.
Yeah, because I see it when people hit, and I think I've seen it for myself, when you hit a business transition or a life transition point, and you've got to make a major decision, and you're not feeling comfortable, you are going to go to that zone of what your strongest talents are. And then you've got to, I suppose, watch out and say, okay, am I going to overplay my hand with this?
Right, exactly.
And that's really where, if you're a strong performer, that's where having you in their life can help to make sure that, okay, they have the courage to go and use those talents, but not overstep the mark.
Right.
And when are they getting stupid?
Yeah.
In taking that risk.
Yeah.
But if we turn this around now, Beth, to you, because and you're a highly evolved leader in your own right, and experience. And just for the listeners' benefit, Beth isn't an initiator in the
I'm an influencer
in the business DNA system.
Yeah.
But is also quite take charge,
Yes, I am.
pioneering, goal setting, creative.
Yep.
So how does all of that come together for you? In how you operate, because like I have, you've got a pretty strong profile, and that it's got a strong drive to getting results. So how do you bring that out in your coaching to help these leaders get to the place they want to get to?
So one of the areas that you didn't mention is I'm highly spontaneous.
Yeah.
And not planned, which was a problem in finance. But anyways, my two strongest factors are creativity and spontaneity, and that can be a gift, but it can also be a huge challenge. I'm in the process of writing my second book, and I'm editing it 5 million times, and it's like this thing is never going to be finished. So I've decided, okay, this is the last time, and then I'm going to hand it over to an editor. But I love the creativity aspect of creating a book. But the spontaneity drives this need to all of a sudden get another idea that's going to impact the book, and I have to go through and change a bunch of stuff. So I realized this in the last month or so. It's like I just gotta stop it, or else this book will never be finished. So, but in my work, creativity and spontaneity are actually a benefit in the fact that every conversation I have is unique. And there's always something that comes up that I hadn't planned for. And the fact is that I'm spontaneous. So that spontaneousness and creativity are a help when I'm having to do things on the fly.
Yeah.
Whereas if I were super planned, that would be difficult to do. I'd have to stop the conversation and say, you know what, I'll make a note there and I'll get back to you on it. That doesn't work in coaching. It's a conversation, and people are looking for that next good question to ask. And that's a lot of what's going on in my mind is when I'm hearing somebody talk, I want to be in the moment and actively listening, but at the same time, I want to be prepared to ask that question that will get them further along.
Because you never know really what someone's going to say.
Nope.
You can ask any question you like with, I would say with good intent to help them.
Yep.
But you don't know what they're going to say and what their reaction's going to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, you know how they'll react as generally speaking as a person, whether they'll be adventurous or take a risk or,
right.
But the actual thing that they say,
right.
You don't know. That's always, that's the opportunity as well. Mm-hmm. But I think with the spontaneity, the real strength of it is the intuitive power and instinctive power that comes out of it.
Right.
A lot of people look at it as well. I might say, well, you're not organized or planned, and a little bit socially, we're told that's what you should be in the world.
Right.
But the fact is, there's an even greater strength in there mm-hmm. about being instinctive and having that intuitive feeling.
Yes, exactly.
And it not being covered up by planning and analytics.
Right.
You can do that anyway, right?
Right. As I said, that's not my natural talent, being planned and being accurate. But there are parts of my job that I need to be, and I can do it. It's just, don't put me in a position where I have to do that 8 hours a day. I wouldn't be a happy person.
So Beth, when you're doing the coaching with, these leaders that are relatively self-aware, evolved, wanting to get to the next step, do you, and I mean, okay, you handle it by designing or intuitively coming up with great questions, mm-hmm. but do you also look in there a little bit at the numbers that they've got in their business, the structures, and in a little bit can see beyond the numbers to ask them that king hit question that's going to get them to really think?
Yeah, I did when I was doing the Vistage work. A lot of the coaching there was business coaching, so there was a lot of work around the business as well as the leadership aspect. Today in my world, it's mostly the leadership aspect. So that there'll be peripheral aspects around the business, but getting into process and finance and things like that, it's unusual.
So it's more of focusing on them as a person, noticing perhaps their energy fields when they've missed a beat on the question or they're hesitating.
Right, exactly.
They're not answering, or they're not manifesting perhaps. The outcome, your radar is going off.
Right, exactly. And business DNA is, part of the very beginning part of the coaching process, the assessment part. And it gives me information along with, interviewing, key execs, doing 360s to determine what are the gaps in their competencies that need to be filled. And then I created a custom development plan for that individual. So there's that plan is heavily on the front end, heavily homework. So they're getting information around like conflict management or something. And then the coaching helps them apply what they're learning. And I'm asking them the questions that will get them further along in the process. So,
but are you when you're doing that, are you seeing areas that they need to go into further that they may not be seeing? I mean, this is sort of really being very specific about blind spots. You know, they might think their problem is in one area, but actually you're seeing it's in a different area.
What we do is we will come to an agreement up front of what those areas are that they're going to work on. I mean, if they don't have a lot of energy around something, that it's really not going to be a benefit to them. But generally what happens is when I'm debriefing them and I'll say, gee, you know, you probably, based on what I'm seeing here, you probably could gain a lot of leverage in your position by learning how to influence better.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about one individual just recently, and he just, you know, when he heard influence, he gravitated towards it. And I was like, okay, so this is an area that we're gonna focus on.
Yeah, so your intuition can take you there.
Yes.
They then tell you a bit more of the story, but then part of that is taking them on a journey so they can learn how to influence.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And
but then there's other times when we're going through the development plan and the coaching aspect of it, and it may be halfway through where in the conversation we uncover something else. That, in fact, there's one client right now that I'm creating another development objective around decision making because of the conversation that we recently had. And it's like, you know what, you could really benefit from learning more about decision making. So I try to be as custom and flexible as possible.
And when you do this, do you also wade into their team and help them see the differences across their team, where they might be having a misfire with someone or not, or hiring, you know, the same people all the time? Or
I got one of those. Yeah. Yes. Well, it's not consistent. It depends on the situation, but I'll run team reports. And it helps them understand, you know, gaps, or I might run a comparison report. There's a specific individual that there might be challenged with in leading, and so those comparison reports give them a baseline to.
Because there's usually always one in the team.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
That's the blockage, and I find sometimes the leaders don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
They don't want to go through the and if they do, they don't want to go through the conflict of it and how you deal with it. But there's a poor human being there on the other side of that maybe shouldn't be in the business, or in fact, with some change from the leader,
right.
And maybe change from themselves, you know, everything can get unlocked.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But often we don't always see all of that, or know what to do.
Right. Totally.
So would you say your spontaneity, though, Beth, and this is sort of move a little bit to your identity, but your spontaneity would be stronger than your creativity in this?
I think from coaching, yes, that spontaneity is probably I leverage more than the creativity. Yeah.
So have you pinpointed your maximum impact when you're the coach?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know, and we could take a broad definition of coaching and extend that out to consulting and advice. But when you're in that role, serving the client, what do you want them to see as your greatest impact on them?
Ideally, it's for them to be in a place where they're making significant impact in their organization, and a larger impact than we started. And for me, I often see that in cases where they've been promoted, where when I worked with them, I've got one woman up in Philadelphia who's been promoted twice and now reports directly to the CEO. And when I started working with her, she had some significant issues that she had to work through, but she was highly goal oriented, and she was aware. She knew. And so, I was able to stretch her and challenge her more than most. And she would do things that we agreed on that most individuals probably wouldn't have felt comfortable doing.
Yeah. So you're, if you want to call it standout talents, really asking the stretch questions.
Yes.
That get them to unlock themselves.
Right.
Because I know even in my own life, Beth, the people I remember actually that have helped me the most, that I have been the ones who've asked me the great question.
Yes.
On the right day.
Yes, it's got to be in the right time frame. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'd been asked that question 2 years before, I may not have answered it. Because I couldn't.
Right.
It's like when I was asked, what are you passionate about, or where do you want to live? I mean, they don't have to be complicated questions, but they sort of hit you in the head,
right,
on the right day, and get you to make the about turn, or is everything all right over there in the area, in the activity you're working on?
Yeah, and
it's amazing what people come out and say. But I think what I've heard is a big word is stretching people.
Yes, exactly.
And challenging them and just looking at, your influencer style, you're not scared to do that. I mean, I think there's, and you've got the intuitive skills to do that.
Yeah. And I think that I have recently started gravitating more towards the younger leader. And I think it's because I feel like I can, they're younger and they're more moldable, and I can provide a bigger impact to them, their career, because I'm working with them earlier on.
But also, you've done it yourself.
Yeah.
If you look at it, you've been in finance, dealing with numbers, understand that, which is a great skill. Didn't love it.
No.
You went against, in a way, you went to something that was more, that you might have been more passionate about, doing sales.
Yes.
And I think, you've clearly got a sales style, because you're competitive, and most people don't know that's probably the most important thing for sales, but you've got a drive there to do that.
Right.
But as you've evolved, you've really been able to pinpoint stretching, asking the stretch questions using your intuition.
Yes, exactly.
And because you've been, you've gone and done this yourself, you've run a business, you know what it's like to do that. And what most people don't know is, of course, running a business involves taking responsibility, those types of things.
Yeah.
So to really bring it back around, Beth, in stretching young leaders to perform at their best, that's really, that's a gift, and that's something that could be a big part of your identity going forward.
I totally agree. Yeah. There was a woman that I've been working with who she's young. She's got a lot of potential. And I was in a meeting with her. I was talking with her on a Zoom call. And I had noticed this earlier, but I thought, okay, I'm at a point now where I can challenge her on this. And she had the and there was like 20 of them in a matter of 30 seconds. And I said, listen, time out. And so I shared with her, I said, what I'm observing is that you use Like some people use and there's a filler, but it's a lot. It's okay to use like every once in a while, but it's excessive and it's distracting. So we had probably another 30 minutes and I could see her. She'd stop or she'd go, she'd stop halfway through. And then I saw her in a meeting about a week later, and we were going around the room, and it was an icebreaker question. She's she probably was talked maybe 2 minutes, and there were 2 likes, and that was it. So after the break, I walked up to her, and I gave her positive feedback. She was just beamed, and I said, one of the things that I noticed was that you wrote down what you were going to say before you spoke. And that might be a technique that you can use moving forward. And she agreed. She's like, yeah, I had all of my thoughts down. So.
And I think what you gave her, Beth, is confidence.
Oh, totally.
Because, you know, like a lot of using the word like is a confidence issue.
Mm-hmm.
And if she went from 20 times to 2 times, just because she could learn to write it down and sort of order her thoughts up a bit and then spontaneously say something.
Yeah.
You built her confidence.
Yeah. And she needed some of that too. The other thing was, you know, she's, I'm guessing 25, 26, something like that. And she's in a marketing company. So they don't dress professionally, they dress marketing but there are times when she needs to dress professionally. And her executive sponsor had, mentioned that to me. And I said, okay. So what I chose to do in that sense was when I saw her dressing professionally, I would let her know how I thought she looked great, that it was professional, and versus waiting for her to dress unprofessionally and talk about it. People want to hear the good stuff.
Well, I think everybody needs to be nurtured and know that there's someone in their corner. And that's, absolutely vital. But also, I think going back to the stretching bit, that's another way to help build someone's confidence. They've got to feel stretched so they can see, gee, I can do it.
Right.
But to know there's some nurturing and someone in their camp as they do it.
Right.
But after all, at the end of the day, we've all got to go and do it ourselves, unfortunately.
Right.
That's part of the challenge. But because I see the big thing out of all this always is confidence. If your confidence goes up, performance goes up. That's the great denominator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you need somebody there encouraging you to build that confidence.
Yeah, you need the advocate.
Yeah.
So Beth, just as we wrap up, because I think that this is probably a good point to wrap up, is there a tip that you've got for the listeners, or a book you think they should read? If they want to become a great leader, they want to stretch themselves, they should, a podcast.
The podcast. I think from a coaching perspective, I think leaders need to learn how to coach, and that would be my big tip for them is if you don't know how to coach, learn to be a good coach. And there are great books out there. One's called The Coaching Manager by James Hunt. There's another one called, it's by Whitmore, and it's the coaching book. I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But those 2 books are good books for leaders to learn and understand how to coach. The Coaching Manager is more about kind of coaching in the moment, catching people in a coachable moment and coaching them.
Because you said it really at the start of our conversation that a great leader, and the research all shows that they have to be approachable, but they also got to be able to listen.
Yes.
And if you're in question asking mode and you're curious, because that's the word that keeps coming up these days for a great leader, to be curious and ask the right questions. Then you can put yourself in the listening mode. And I think that's, the essence of what you're saying. To do, and if any leader should start to learn to do that.
Yes.
And I suppose we wished we'd learned to do it even earlier than we have.
Exactly. If I'd known what I know today 20 years ago.
But I think, Beth, this is fantastic, and the fact you're going to go out there and stretch a lot of young leaders and really impact them to be great, then there are going to be many businesses in good hands and this country in good hands. So thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it, Hugh.